Good evening and welcome to Nox Mente. Tonight's guest is Susan Chang, or Susan Chang, or Susie Chang she likes. Anyway, Susan's the author of Tarot Correspondences, Ancient Secrets for Everyday Readers by Llewellyn Press, 2018. And a Spoonful of Promises from Globe Picot, 2011. Along with deck creator Mel Moline, Susie hosts the Fortune's Wheelhouse Esoteric Tarot podcast, which explores imagery and symbolism in the Rider-Waite, Smith, Thoth, and Tabula Mundi decks. She's the creator of the Arcane Case for tarot decks, which can be found at her Etsy shop, along with her line of esoteric perfumes. She reads tarot weekly in person in Spirit Crystals in Northampton, Massachusetts. All of her products, events, and blog posts can be found at her website, which is in the description. Susan, welcome to the show.
Hi, guys. Good to be here.
Welcome. This is going to be great. You're going to bring us some woo.
We love the woo. Woo.
That's right.
Hello, everyone in chat who's joining us. Good to meet you. New folks. Okay.
Hello out there. You all know I don't look at chat.
And hello,
All right.
everybody who's came from Fortune's Wheelhouse Academy Facebook group.
Yes.
I know. Yep.
Welcome.
Yes. Ooh, welcome. So I pre-chat stuff since in the general news, I was asking Susie about the great storm going on since it's in her neck of the woods. It's kind of I find it interesting.
Yeah, it's just going to be really, really cold tonight. I think we got the snow yesterday. Nothing much to speak of. Not much to speak of for New England.
Right. Well, that's one of the things. As a Midwesterner, we always had really intense storms in the winter. I mean, I remember growing up and having snow, making snow forts and tunnels through big piles of snow. So
yeah, and you guys get that lake effect snow too, so it just goes on and on and on forever.
Yeah. Yes.
I got that in Chicago. Man, it was nasty.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wind chill. Oh, geez.
There was a discussion on Facebook today about that. I think it was Aaron David's girlfriend.
Oh, yeah.
Was talking about the wind chill was going to be 28 below or something. Asheville. I'm like, that's not, when I was a kid, I remember 50 degrees below wind chills easily.
I remember those low too. In the area I grew up in, which is a lot of Scandinavian types, the words always went around, like those grim and frostbitten, Newfoundlanders and where metal really comes from.
I know, it's all climate change.
Mm.
Well, whatever it is, it's interesting. So, all right. Hi, Susie. I'm thrilled about this.
I am too. I mean, when I can't think of another situation where people actually want to hear about your dreams. So, I think your show is just an amazing premise. And since you contacted me, I've started listening, and I really think it's great. I think it's fascinating stuff you're finding out.
Oh man, that's an honor. I know. And as I have to tell everyone too, since I'm the one blabbing up most of the time, Jerry does all of the work. I show up. Jerry does literally everything else. It's so funny. I feel like I need to say that from time to time.
But I do it all for you.
Jerry, you do it for us. This is our love baby.
Mm-hmm. It's our homunculus.
Yes.
Should I step out?
No, we're good. All right, so let's dive right in. What was inspiring you? What really sticks out for you in your earliest memories of your life?
Yeah, so I grew up in the suburbs of New York in one of those Hudson River towns. So really literally looking out over the river, over the train tracks, all of that. And that's one of my, seminal memories of just looking out towards the sunset, hearing the train go by, at that, incredibly lonely hour and watching the river go by. So there's a part of me that's like always in that space. But I was definitely a little bit of, well, like the kids in our tribe, right? I was a little off by myself, a little bit weird, constantly reading, and definitely talking to the fairies, a lot of that. But sort of the most important, one of the most important parts naturally, I think, in terms of like my natural environment as a kid was our backyard because we had sort of a hill that sloped up behind the house. And at the top of the hill, there was this line of like 7 or 8 pine trees all in a row. And they were very old and very thick. So I could go in there and they formed like chambers in between each pine tree. And that was like my house, right? So 4 or 5 little chambers underneath trees. And I, sort of even now I dream about them, but they were, a place for me to take refuge, a place for me to take my book, a place for me to have my, imaginary world. And this is the suburbs, it wasn't like the country where I live now. It was pretty cultivated place, but that was enough, to feel a little bit of wildness inside.
Yeah, I mean, any time when you have any bits of nature, even a little thicket, you're there with it, especially as a child.
Yeah.
We really connect. Were you a child that read a lot?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Never without a book. Even my sister and I were joking about this the other day. She oh, it's macabre and it's sad and it's funny. My father passed away a couple weeks ago and we had services this last weekend and she started out her speech with the tagline, Crest has been proven to be a preventive dentifrice, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that's written on the back of the toothpaste.
Oh my
Because
God.
when we were kids, there was no reading material in the bathroom. So you just read that
Yes.
over and over and over.
Oh my God. I was one of those kids too. I would read anything that had any writing on it.
Exactly. If it was there, it got read,
Yes. I love that at your father's funeral. That's really
Everyone was like, what? But I just started laughing hysterically.
Oh, it's good. And that's what funerals need a lot of times, some laughter.
Exactly. And there was something else oh yes. So I just made a couple notes for myself here. One thing that apparently had a serious effect on me was The Wizard of Oz when I was a kid. So before the Tolkien, before everything else, before probably even, or maybe around the same time as all the Andrew Lang books, but The Wizard of Oz really got stuck in my head. And I used to have this, vast imaginary world in which, well, Glinda the Good Witch, in the book, she's the Witch of the South.
Of the North.
Right?
Right. Oh, wait.
Well, in the movie, she's the Witch of the North. In the book, she's the Witch of the South, which is a weird thing. I don't know why they did that. But I reasoned Good Witch of the South has to be a Good Witch of the North. That's got to be me. So I had this like whole world in my mind where I was the Good Witch of the North. I had, Glinda was my friend. I had all this like, Oz geography going on. And yeah, real popular.
I loved it. Of course, that's your tribe to me.
I was just thinking, we've had a lot of people bring up Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland is another one. But you just made me think about the north-south aspects of that. Do you think, because they reversed it in the film, in some way that's like the system showing us that it's inverted in a way?
Maybe. I don't know. I thought they just made a mistake.
Oh. Or the other thing is that the witches represent archangels. So the directions, maybe they wanted to, I don't know. I'll show up.
Didn't they change quite a bit? Weren't her shoes, I can't remember. I thought they were silver or something.
They were silver shoes. They weren't ruby slippers. But man, once you see the ruby slippers, that's
it. Yeah. Well, the Technicolor, I mean, how, it's amazing.
The very first Technicolor.
My mother gave me those books. There were 3 of them, weren't there? Journeys Through Oz.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I can't remember, but I coveted them. Of course, I can't remember much of it. That's
Right.
interesting. So with that, I want to talk about that for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
What was your general thought? So you gave us a little bit of that, how you were feeling with you were the witch of the north if Glinda was of the south and all that. What did you think overall? Like what was the feeling you got from reading that in
That
general?
was really a feeling of hmm, safety and empowerment, I guess, in the sense that, first of all, there had to be magic, right? Because if
Yes.
there wasn't magic, what's the point? And so that's just where my first magic must have come from. And
Mm.
I guess, yeah, it was just a sense, I had a habit when I went to sleep of being, and I still feel like this. I'm really excited when I go to sleep because I know I'm going somewhere.
Yes.
And when I was little, I would actively, try really, really hard to think about all the places I wanted to be and, all the worlds I wanted to be in so I could end up there. It didn't always work, but it was worth trying, right? So one of the places was Oz. I would try to go there. And I don't know, I probably made it there a couple times, but I was definitely going to try because that's the kind of kid I was. Oh, and I forgot to tell you. So my sister just reminded me of this the other day. So my parents were both artists, which is a little weird for Chinese Americans, but they both were. And so our house was like filled with their paintings and my dad's weird sculptures and stuff. And one of his sculptures was a Jacob's ladder. It was like he had created this wooden ladder structure with a mirror on each end and
Oh
suspended
wow.
it from the ceiling. So that hung in our house forever. But and it's continued to stand even after I tried to climb it. And and that mirror, and I always thought about this too because when I tried to climb it, inevitably the mirrors cracked. Two cracked mirrors, 14 years of bad luck.
Yes. Yes. I subscribed to that when I was young too with the mirrors.
If
I was
not
counting
infinite
that.
years of bad luck.
Yes. 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 Right. Because of the infinity. And you're so
Right.
fortunate to have artists as parents that both
Yeah.
of
Yeah, it skipped us. We were musicians, but yeah, they were quite rebellious for their family and their time. Yeah.
that's quite a gift. And I
Yeah.
mean, clearly it shows in you, which is, I don't know who your sister is, but
She's a
it
musician. Yeah.
it's played out. And I
Mhm.
consider musicians artists, by the way.
Yes. Yes. We're all of a kind.
Yes.
Yeah.
With the people tapping into creativity.
Mhm. Mhm.
So back there in your youth, what other kinds of things like pop culture did you like certain cartoons? What was going on with all that?
Yeah. So I definitely had a bit of a weird childhood, definitely not normal in the sense that, my parents may have been rebellious, but they still did certain things. So my sister and I both became musicians very early, you know, um, and we both went to Juilliard as children.
Oh wow.
So for 8 years apiece. And that meant that there was not a lot of pop culture
Yes.
other than Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street.
I love
Uh,
Mr. Rogers.
oh yeah, I mean, I think that man did so much good
Hmm.
in the years he was on this earth. So my world was mostly I was really into opera as a little kid,
Mm.
which is again not the most
What was your
normal. So
favorite opera back then?
still probably is, well, pretty much I liked all the Mozart operas,
Hmm.
but today my favorite's Don Giovanni. Back then it
Just
might have
gonna
been the
say.
Magic Flute.
Yeah.
Part- Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Don Giovanni's witchy.
It's witchy and weird and beautiful from start to finish.
Yes.
And Magic Flute is wicked
Yes.
occulty.
Yes. Yes.
I've heard people talk about
Yeah.
Mozart having a deep occult knowledge stuff.
Yeah, he was probably a
Beethoven
Mason.
too, probably.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
German. He was German, Austrian. But yeah,
Austrian.
Mm-hmm.
they had magic. Everyone did.
That It is, well, that, I mean, that, so asking about the pop culture thing, and there you find yourself at Juilliard, where really a lot of people come from that are part of the mill of pop culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's Juilliard's just major. And so I find that significant for myself.
Yeah.
What was your dream life like early on?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. So I had a lot of flying dreams, and later, in fact, my whole life I've had a lot of flying dreams, but a lot of getting tangled in telephone wires.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, a lot of sort of self-sabotage like that. A lot of invisibility dreams too, which are, those two things are kind of opposite, but I have both. And yeah.
When you fly, do you have do you fly the same every time, or has it morphed?
Usually I get a running start. And
Oh,
then I sort of
I love that.
usually get a running start, sometimes flap my arms.
Yes.
Usually there needs to be some momentum building, or if I can find a good high thing to jump off of, that also works.
It's funny. These I love. You're the first one, I think, Jerry's. Has anyone else said they get a running start? I think Susie's the
when
first.
she said that, I was thinking back on, I hope she's got all these written down, because I have no idea if anyone else said that. So no.
I think it's the first for me. I do write it all down, but I don't recall anyone else saying
I can't
that.
remember hearing that, no.
That's
Yeah.
seriously awesome.
Yeah, it's sort of like you run and then you lean towards the ground until you're practically parallel with the ground, and then you just pick up your feet,
Oh,
That was in a
gotta be
TV
out,
show
though.
I saw recently, by the way.
really? Which one?
Oh,
Jerry?
really?
It's a show called Reverie. It was on ABC. It's about, it's weird. It's about a brain-computer interface that basically puts you in a dream state, and an AI drives your reality, and it drives your brain, your consciousness, into this virtual reality.
Oh my
Sounds
God.
up
And
my
that's
alley.
she was standing on a stump, and she leaned forward to 90-degree angle
Mm-hmm.
and started to float, and then flew.
That's it. That's
Mhm.
it. Yeah. I also had like an absolute ton of nightmares when I was little, and those were recurring and wild. So there was, first of all, there was one. I don't know if this is a thing. This might be a thing where I had like I would see a pattern of blue and red, like electric dots. I think it might be an actual thing that people do when they're falling asleep. But for me, it
It's
was.
significant in a lot of the woo, Susie, a lot of the
Yeah.
program.
Yeah. There you go. And I always thought when I saw that I was about to have a nightmare. So I would get kind of worked up about it. And I saw that on multiple occasions. I had at least once. It was so terrifying. I hoped I'd never have it again, and I'm not sure I did. I had the dismemberment dream where my parents were dismembered and laid on like a background of these blue and red dots. Ugh, that was awful.
Do you
So
remember more details of that one?
yeah, it took place in the basement, right? So
Mm.
it was in our house. We had a very like dreamscape friendly house because you entered, it was a split level. So you entered on a landing, and then left was up and right was down. And
Yes.
down was where the laundry room and the sewing room and my dad's studio were. So the sewing room was where this took place. And it was underneath sort of there was like a counter or a bed. Anyway, and underneath that, there was that pattern of dot against the wall. Like it was almost like I don't know, a light bright or some kind of pin board or something. Anyway, so I saw that more than once. And yeah, and that was a really horrible dream. But there's another reason that that room was really scary because, so I mentioned my parents were artists. And so one of their awesome projects when I was like 4 was they decided, God bless them, to make a plaster cast of my head.
Oh my God. With the straw where you have to be still.
Yeah.
Oh
So
dear.
so there was this bust in my house of my head,
Oh.
life size. And it lived in my room until I said I can't have it in here, because it's horrible and it's frightening me and giving me nightmares. And so they put it in the basement. Where else, right?
Yeah,
So
just to
now
make
I
it
have
creepier.
I have this like permanent nightmare generator in the basement. And yeah, and oh god, that thing was so creepy. And so I would have nightmares um where the th- I would be standing on the landing and the head would start floating up the stairs and following me. Um, Sometimes it would be, I remember another thing that sometimes it would be just like geometric shapes, like a 3D triangle or a circle or something about yay big would follow me up the stairs. And oh, it was the most terrifying thing ever. So
Was it
yeah.
transparent?
So the shapes of the head.
No, the triangle thing.
Oh no, it was you know what it was like? It was white. Yeah, solid and white, maybe off-white. I sort of confuse it in my mind with this sort of like gelatinous 60s, 70s dessert my mom used to make. But yeah, it was sort of white and opaque and of undefined texture. And they would just
And
sort of float up and chase me around the house.
interesting. Did you ever have any kind of like transmission with them, like communication?
No, I was too terrified. I ran.
Yeah, well, that's a wise thing. I think that reflex is a good thing.
I think so. I don't know because, I am a specialist in chase dreams to some extent. I do get chased a lot in dreams, but about 5 years ago, 10, no, more like 10 years ago, I had a massive change in my chase dream scenarios where, I was just in a typical chase and I didn't know who was chasing me or whatever. And I remember this dream because it was so different and it really changed everything. I suddenly stopped and I said, I don't see why I don't see why I'm running. So I turned around to face the person who was chasing me, and it was just like some ordinary guy who looked like anybody on the street. I mean, he was just like the most normal looking person. And I said, "What do you want?"
Ooh.
And the guy just looked at me and he said, "I don't know." And he walked away. So, yeah, so that since then, I have to say that was like a seminal dream for me. It definitely since then I've been afraid of less. I think it's fair to say.
How old were you then, if I may ask?
When I had this sort of confrontation dream, it's really only like 10 years ago, something like that.
Well, I don't know how old you are. Here, put it
I'm
this way.
49.
Was it, so it was not during your Saturn return. Okay.
No.
That would have been interesting.
Although it is, you know what it is today? It's my Jupiter conjunct the midheaven, my fourth one. And I actually went, because I'm an obsessive documentarian, I've kept a diary every day since I was like 10. I
Wow.
got to go back and look and see, every time that's happened. So
So let me, just for clarity, I
Thanks.
thought the triangle things were something you saw in waking life, but they were in the dream.
No, they were in the dream. That was one of my
Okay.
worst nightmares. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely agree. In dreams, you should confront stuff. And if one can do it like Rin Collier, like confront them and eat them, like
Oh, I heard that one. That was great. Yeah.
he was he's awesome. I've never done that, and so it's well, I have since having that chat with him, but before that, no. Okay, so back back again. I wanted to, you said something very provocative, but before we get to it, just some other basic stuff. Were you brought up with any kind of religious stuff?
Not really. Think um I think that my family, my dad's family was fairly okay. So his mom founded the Buddhist Association of the United States, but Buddhists are non-evangelical, so none of the kids were Buddhist, right? And none of us were. Um, and then, like my mom's side, there was some sort of like it can't hurt Christianity going on, right? But nothing serious. So for me, though, I think that, I mean, nowadays describe myself as more animist than anything else. And I think as a kid, I was kind of naturally an animist. So I feel like I'm kind of coming back to that in
Yeah,
my
nice.
midlife. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's weird how it all spirals.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then on basic stuff, your chart information, like your sun
Oh,
and rising.
yeah. So I'm a Virgo sun, but I'm Pisces rising. So I'm really all over that axis. And then I have an Aquarius moon.
We
I
Pisces
have
rule.
and the rising for me is the most
Yeah.
of that trinity. All right, so this is what intrigued me, and I don't think we have had anyone talk about this in the history of Nox Mente thus far. Invisibility in dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Girl, give us some details.
Okay, so I am definitely a person who dreams about crime a lot, and invisibility is very important if you dream about crime a lot. And so I will typically have dreams where there's, murder or death or mayhem of some kind. And it's really not that disturbing because it's a dream, right? I mean,
Right.
that's what dreams are for, to help you work stuff out. So in the context of the dream, it doesn't really bother me, except um, I'm often trying to get away with it. You know, whether I'm the murderer or not, there's usually an element of me having to get away with it. And that's where being invisible comes in. So much like the flying, though, I can't sustain invisibility for very long before something starts to show. It's sort of like something always, and I was talking with my daughter about this, about her flying dreams. She never can keep it up for very long. Can't keep up flying very long, can't keep up invisibility very long. you know um Something always starts to show, like you try to fade into the wall, or you
Mhm.
try to fade into, like, there's a brick chimney or something, and you try to, like, camouflage yourself like that, but there's always a sock or something that does not look like a brick, and whoever's chasing you is like, that is not a chimney. So, yeah. So, but I think that I've, yeah, I don't know. I sort of feel like I've really kind of not explored my superpowers, my dreaming superpowers in a while. I haven't had flying or invisibility dreams for some time. So I'm not sure why, but I can tell you that it is definitely a skill that at the time that you want it, you really, really want it.
Mhm. When with flying dreams in particular, which I think a greater majority of people at least experience a little bit, you get if you're not having a high degree of lucidity within the dream, a lot of times those bring it in because it's so out of your normal in the day life,
Right.
right?
Right.
So is that the
Absolutely.
same experience with invisibility?
No, no. Lucidity is much more likely for me flying than invisible. Like when you're, because I think the invisibility thing is more driven by fear, and rather than the flying. And I think that that causes you to be less, I don't know, less likely to go lucid because you're so lost in the feeling of anxiety or whatever it is. I don't know. It's a very Slytherin thing to do, go invisible.
House of Slytherin. Well, I would like to incorporate that power. I can't say off the top of my head that I have experienced that, and so I'm intrigued, and it's going to be on. Now it's in my head. You've given me the
Mhm. Mhm.
right,
Mhm.
so that I want to have fun with. Any powers you don't have here?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, the powers are great, and and I think that's one of the really real beauties of lucidity, that I mean, or sorry, of dreaming generally, that you get to try out stuff that is probably part of you anyway, that's just not your daily experience, not your mundane world. And I think that I mean, I really, really love and worship dreams in a sense, because I do think that I do think that the world is, our reality is not as we perceive it, and
Yes.
that dreams help us get a little bit of a glimpse into what it might be like. It's I don't know. I also do journey work, and I find that those two methodologies are not dissimilar.
Yes, they are. They're in line, I think. Same with well, journey work is akin also to, active imagination
Right.
and all of that, which is really getting into the same mindset, but while you're awake.
Exactly. Exactly. And and it's really, probably only started doing journey work a year and a half ago, but of all the different esoteric practices I've tried, there's something just so powerful about it. You know,
Have
the
you
way.
been
Mhm.
exposed to QHHT at all?
No, what's that?
Quantum healing hypnosis therapy, I think.
Hmm. Sounds like fun.
It's like, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but to me, it's like almost a regression therapy, but in a counselor-led reality. You know, like
Hmm.
they'll take you back in time so you can repair wounds in your mind, which will basically, you forgive yourself for whatever you did, but they take it
Yeah,
back into the context of the timeline.
that does sound like something you might do in a journeying practice. It sounds very, very similar to
Yeah.
yeah, cool. Hmm.
Do did you when you were little and you had brought up this a little bit earlier in the show about having lots of nightmares and you brought some of that forth. What were there general themes going on besides the crime stuff?
Yeah, let's see. Abandonment is the other big one for me.
Mhm.
Because, well, I mean, I don't know. I didn't lose my mom until I was 14. She died of cancer when I was 14. And however, I had incredible abandonment dreams when I was a kid. And I sort of feel like, whatever's going on in here is not necessarily respectful of the timeline, right? So, I could have been
Right.
picking up on that in some way. And yeah, so that was always a huge bear. But and getting lost.
Careful with that mic, Eugene.
I'm trying to get it closer to me. It's really far away. So, is it alright if we talk about abandonment for a minute?
Sure,
This is something
absolutely.
very deep in my life with the Saint Mom stuff and uh, all of that, and so
Mhm,
it's definitely one of my, in Jungian terms, complexes.
mhm,
So,
for sure. Yeah.
and so you were having those before your mother died.
Yeah, yeah, I was, but after my mother died, so I had a very, um so my mom was she really focused more of her attention on my sister, they were both very intense, so there was a lot of fighting and stuff like that, but my mom, um, she was pretty easy on me, and I felt very close to her. But, after she died of lung cancer after about, year and a half of being sick.
Oh,
I had a dream, probably just a few months later where, um, she was back and she was fine. And I think this is a dream that people often have when they lose a parent. It's
mhm,
almost like your dream maker's trying to fix it.
mhm.
And, and I was so happy and I was so relieved. And then of course I woke up. But then I had over the years, she's come a few different times, sporadically. Um, and in as an adult, when I've dreamed about her, I've been aware that she died, and that she's passed over. Um, Although sometimes it's like she's back, but not in real life, just back. And I think that's partly because in the last year, so it's actually really interesting that you contacted me because I've been chronicling my dreams, which I almost every day for about a year now. And she has come back as part of the ancestor practice that I've developed. And I've done a lot of journey work around contacting my mom. And in a few situations, we've been together in dreams, kind of doing the business of ancestor work. So that's been pretty amazing. And, you know, and and in a sense that helped me with this whole situation with my dad as well, because I felt like, okay, we're going to get to talk. It's all right, you know.
I do know.
Yeah.
It's funny. These things are intangible until you do know. Like, that's why I always call it, like, the dead parent club and stuff like this.
Yes.
You just don't know until you know, especially if you were close to them. So, I
Yeah.
mean, some people just were not close to their parents, and it's no big deal to them, and
Right.
it just never was that way. With okay, so back on your Momo, is did you have any foresight, and you knew she was having health issues, whether
Hmm.
however you comprehended it,
Hmm.
whatever your comprehension level was of that. Were you having dreams beforehand where she was fading away and leaving?
No, not really. I don't really have much record of my dreams from that time, so I can't really say. I don't think I was as good at remembering them at the time.
Mhm.
So who can say? You know, I'm not a particularly psychic person in terms of like the clairs, but I do have the occasional psychic dream. And no, I don't remember having anything like that as far as her case is concerned.
And then after, in these dreams you've had with her after, but before the modern, when you were
Mhm.
the first few times you saw her, were you what was the emotional scale
Oh,
for you?
amazing. It was like a 10, you know. It was just the sensation of joy and relief.
Mhm.
That's why I remember it. Yeah.
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 Yeah, me too. I was so overwhelmed though, and then the missing was so hard that we just had to have barriers between us. It's like she's
Yeah.
like, "Okay, I'm gonna be behind a glass or in another room so you can sort this out."
Yeah. When did you lose yours?
Oh geez, I think it's 21 years
Mm.
ago, February 16th at 1:07 AM.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
Yeah, it's
gosh.
everyone like the death so many deaths in my family around around February, around now.
Really? Hmm.
Yes, it's uncanny, and a lot of births in April. My mother was in May, and my grandmother's April, and mine's April. A lot
Mhm.
of spring births, a lot of spring deaths. Very strange how those cycles work out.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Hmm.
So, okay, and then also I want while we're on the subject, so with your papa, did you
Mhm.
know ahead of time?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He had had Alzheimer's for 20 years.
Oh my.
So, yeah, he actually lived with me for the first 8 or 9, so I was his caretaker, which was whew, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, and then he had been in various forms of assisted living after that. So yeah, and to be honest, you know, I found it very hard to journey. I wouldn't journey on him at all because it was like, you know, he's surrounded by this miasma of
Mhm.
fogginess, you know, in between worlds. And I almost think that, you know, as a person with Alzheimer's, you might be partly in the dream state, you know, your
Yes.
reality might be like that. So I figured once he crossed over, I might have a chance, but not yet, because I do believe that there's probably some kind of thing that happens, some kind of journey the soul has to deal with after after death. So eventually, I think we'll get there.
Yeah, it's really fresh.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I
It's
did well, you know, I forgot about this. I did I had this incredible dream after the night my dad died. Now, before he died, I had done some journey work. I had gone to my ancestral place in Journey, and I had gotten to see, um, my father reunite with his mom. So, I knew that was going to be okay. But, the night that he died, I went home because we had been sitting vigil in the hospice with him. I went home and I went to sleep, and I had this weird dream. And it was definitely, you know how some dreams just sort of have an asterisk next to them right away? You know, they're
yes.
special,
Yes.
different, weird. This was one of
Yes.
those. So I'm just pulling out my notes here. Oh yeah, so it started out at one of those like super normal dreams about being lost in a city with a car, like totally normal dream. I have those all the time. This one was Boston. and I had trouble finding a parking space. Anyway, so after I settle all that, I go into a building which I think is a museum, and I find myself on the top floor. It's actually, by the time I get to the top floor, I'm convinced it's a library, except it's empty and there are no books. And and that's right there. That's something, because I call these upstairs downstairs dreams, where you're sort of traveling between subconscious realm and whatever's up there. So reaching for the beyond. But that's what top floors and stairs are represent to me. So I was on this threshold or landing on the top floor of this empty library, and off to my left, sort of light just shimmering. It was maybe 2 feet high, very bright, very pure, and and I thought, well, something's kind of weird here. It was almost like when you're about to go lucid. I knew there was something. I definitely knew something was not normal. So I said, okay, I'm going to have a look at it, and I turned my attention to and it materialized into this, like, I kept thinking of him as a skeleton gentleman, 8 inches tall, very small, but and very weird. And I looked at this thing, and it looked at me, and we just looked at each other, and I assured him that we had nothing to fear from one another, although I was, my heart was like pounding like mad. And 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 after that, just I guess I just woke up right after that, because I remember waking up and laughing, because I thought, well, obviously, or wouldn't it make sense if my dream maker decided to bring me a dream about my father? But isn't it ridiculous that he's 8 inches tall?
It's really potent imagery though,
Yeah,
considering that the Alzheimer's, right? And so in the middle of all that that's Alzheimer's, there is the core.
exactly, exactly. And there, and I posted this on dream interpretation group I'm on, and somebody observed, first of all, makes sense it's an empty library because nobody knows what happens
Right,
afterwards.
right.
But also the fact that in my mind he was a gentleman, which there were no physical cues. He wasn't like he had a top hat and a monocle or something. It was just, in my mind, he was a gentleman, and that's the way my father was. He was a gentleman. He was a person who was courteous to everyone he met. So I'm pretty sure that was a connection.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's so much there. And on here, one of the things we don't do is get into interpretation because that
Mm,
gets sticky. Um, Although, I mean, of course, I make my associations. I find them
mm.
extremely potent and powerful, Susie. I,
Yeah.
I want to, so in this, I'd like to talk about Alzheimer's for a second, if you don't
Mhm.
mind,
Sure.
because I find that Alzheimer's is definitely the shifting of consciousness. And I've been around it a little. I didn't I haven't been close in like you were. So
Mm.
I've seen it, a grandmother had it. It was interesting.
It is, yeah.
S but my takeaway, and so my ponders on it, is a state of consciousness, is a shifting, mutable experiences, how it's like a detaching process in a strange way. It's like, um, if you're so for me, I'll use myself as an example. And this is probably too personal.
Mm.
I'm really attached to the stories that I tell myself. I think we all are. And
Sure.
so, one of the stories is I've got really fucking great stuff. Right. I've got like the perfect witch cottage.
Mhm.
It's like the Addams family complete with the real deal, no hot topic here, okay? All that. And so these are stories we tell ourselves. This is stuff we're attached to and
Mhm.
identity stuff. And so something like Alzheimer's comes in
Mhm.
and it rearranges your actual memories, the timelines, your attachment to things and things that are the stories of your life. It's like it's a process. You get to see, a raw process of letting go
Hmm.
into the passage of what death is.
Yes, it's really, really interesting. Now that it's behind me, I can really kind of see it more clearly. And the first like 10, 15 years were like regressing in time,
Hmm.
sort of like, so Alzheimer's strips away. It strips away your short-term memory first. It strips away the things that were your rewards, your
Hmm.
accomplishments, all the things that you sort of prided yourself on. I was talking about this funeral. It's sort of like it takes away all the things, all your pretensions, all the things you thought you were, all the things you took for granted.
Yeah.
And bit by bit, it sort of strips you down. And you can see the regression in terms of like, my father always liked to do puzzles. So he could first do, a 300 piece puzzle and then a 200, 150, until he couldn't do puzzles at all. And so you see this sort of like going backwards in time. The memories also recede in time. So you lose the most recent ones first. And then as you go further into the disease, you get down to the core memories. And so my father never forgot, that he grew up as a little boy in Shanghai. And he, and he never, I think the one thing that was most remarkable to me is that he never lost his sort of friendliness towards people, which happens a lot in Alzheimer's, so much so that people consider paranoia a symptom of the disease in its late stages. But my father never was like that because I think temperamentally he simply was a person who was very open to everything. And so he did not experience that particular horror. But the other thing that I noticed is that when I would go to see him in the last couple of years, he didn't know me, he couldn't really speak, not in coherent sentences. It was always sort of a word salad, but the rhythm of conversation was still there.
Mm.
So, he would say something and I would say something. And, it would sound, if you were like not a speaker of English, but thought it was just another language, it would sound like a regular conversation. It's just, clearly if you were there and trying to make sense of it, there was no sense to be had. So, there was an impulse that remained towards sociability, towards connecting with other people. And, it seemed to me that Alzheimer's could take everything away except that
Mhm.
desire to connect to others. So,
There's something about it that reminds me of the descent into the underworld, the journey of the Nana. I mean, all
yeah.
cultures have that descent
Hmm.
where you come to these gates and you're stripped of your titles and then, down to nothing. Your
Hmm.
clothes are at one gate, your
Hmm. All
personas.
your fancy tools.
Yes, all the stories we tell ourselves about
That's right.
ourselves
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that we
It's
live around, the clutter.
yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And it almost makes you think that, if you I don't know, if you imagine what happens after death, you would think that the soul would have to give everything up then anyway. And it's almost like Alzheimer's kind of does it for you.
See, this is the core of what I find fascinating about
Yeah.
Alzheimer's
Mhm.
is it seems like instead of it seems like an exo process of what I imagine goes on
Yeah.
internally.
Yeah. Yeah,
After
that's an interesting way to think of it. That could well be. Mm.
so it's intriguing. I think about it a lot, and one of the things is it's on the rise.
Mm.
It's one of those things that's on the rise as far as at least statistics.
Yes. Yes. And, I don't know exactly. I think it's one of those things that are triggered by genetic factors, but also environmental factors.
Yes.
They're always looking at inflammation, but
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if, the connection between stress and inflammation and the anxieties that are sort of regularly produced by the world we live in right now. I would be very surprised if that weren't all related.
Yeah,
Who's
I
anxious?
think yeah. I think it's definitely related. I mean, we're living in a very interesting time period where there's a lot of toxicity in our, foods and air and all that could
Hmm.
be contributing. So
Hmm.
I got a
around
question. Wait,
carry on.
hold up there. You were talking about the person's still there, but they can't make the connections, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to compare this. My thinking along that line was maybe it's a dissolution of the ego. A slow...
Could well be.
And it reminded me of a conversation we had with Jason Louv, who kind of pretty much stated that he didn't think ego existed, that it was just the culmination of all of your experiences, and that's presents as your ego. So if you can have a connection with that person, that consciousness behind the fucked up brain, kind of disproves that theory that ego doesn't exist.
Right, exactly. There's something that's definitely dismantled, and if it's not the ego, I don't know what. But I'll tell you another example that's kind of interesting. I have an uncle with Alzheimer's who spent his entire life in the Foreign Service, the consummate diplomat, very thoughtful. You would be around him and always looking to make sure that you were comfortable, that you were, totally taken care of. The most considerate person you ever met. Anyway, so he has Alzheimer's now. And a couple years ago, we had a Thanksgiving reunion, like we often do. And all the food was sort of laid out in a buffet. And his normal self would have deferred to everyone and sort of let everyone go first. Blah, blah, blah. Well, this new self went straight for the best pieces. And he took like 10 minutes to select the perfect piece of turkey, right? And he was not going to let anyone get in his way. And I was just like, you go for it, man. Good for you.
Oh, that is hilarious. I love it. I immediately think of a Virgo. Right? Oh, that is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something like freeing in that.
Yeah. Drives everyone around you bananas, but still,
In the process of your Papa's transition, especially during the later stage, what were your dreams? What was going on in your dream world in that period of time?
Well, it depends. It was such a long period of time,
So how did they evolve?
Yeah, I think that I remember I went through therapy towards the end of the time that he was living with us because it was so hard. I had a wonderful friend / therapist who I traded editing services for therapeutic services with over the course of 2 or 3 years. And I remember talking to him about my dreams because I had a lot of those guilty getting away with something dreams. Because my father was living in my house and I had 2 small kids and I was trying to pursue my writing career as a paid journalist. And my dad was constantly, coming in, bothering me about every little thing. Where are my glasses? Like that kind of a thing when they're on his bed. So, and I was constantly getting irritated with him and I felt terrible about it. So I had a lot of dreams at the time about, me committing crimes and trying to get away with it. And what's funny? I have to sort of express this in tarot because that's one of my languages, and it's very fundamental to the way I see the world. So my moon, I told you it's an Aquarius moon. It's in the final decan, 27 degrees of Aquarius, and the card associated with that in tarot is the 7 of Swords, which is actually in the system of correspondences I use, also associated with the moon. So it shows a guy sneaking off with 7 swords. It is like the sneakiest card in the deck.
Right-of-way image, yeah.
Exactly. I call it the card of the divided mind. And it's really a card of saying one thing and doing another. So there was an immense amount of that going on for me, constantly stealing from time from one place to do other things, and putting it other places and feeling really guilty about that. So that's what my dreams were like a lot of the time during that period.
I've always thought of that card as a cleanup crew. You're on the cleanup crew.
Yeah. And well, I can understand that because I think fundamentally it's a card about resourcefulness and resourcefulness can be positive or negative. It could be thievery, but it could also be being shrewd, like Odysseus. It can be, cleaning up because you see some utility in the stuff that other people have left behind, and being, smart about repurposing or upcycling that. So
Use it
I
as
think,
foundation.
hmm
Mhm.
hmm a constant a willingness to experiment and try and make things work out one way or another. Yeah.
Sorry, Nish.
No, that it actually brings me right into to some of the mechanics of how you dream, Susie.
hmm
How so since there's such a tarot is all symbolic, and also it's mathematic with the astral climate, the astrology of it. How does this heavily affect how you dream? Did it change at any point when you got into the tarot?
I think so. I think so. I mean, I've been in tarot for 20 years, so it's a little hard to say, but I definitely feel like my symbolic language has consolidated around symbols in the tarot. And like every once in a while I'll actually get some tarot stuff in my dreams, which is weird because it's sort of like it's as if you got a book that you could read, right? Which is hard to do in dreams, period. Usually you can't.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
it's uncommon for
It's
sure.
uncommon. It's uncommon. And so that's always weird when I see a tarot reading. Although, here's a really funny example of one of those. I can find it in my notes here. So yeah, so I dreamed that my daughter and I went on a field trip with her class to the museum. It was like a historical museum or a science museum or something. Anyway, we got separated from the group, and when I was coming down the stairs, we were sort of peeking in the exhibits, and it was sort of like there was a room set aside that had been sort of chained off with a velvet rope, like it was some famous old person's uh, room, like Emily Dickinson or something like that, or some kind of writer or poet. And on the table, there was a tarot reading, and and I was like, oh well, that's kind of cool. I should look at that. So I looked at it, and it had like 5 or 6 cards, and I noticed that the reading had been altered from the original. I don't know what I knew about the original reading, but I knew how it was supposed to be. And the reading included the moon, the Two of Cups, maybe the Seven of Pentacles. But I knew that that was supposed to be the star, not the moon. And it was really weird that, on reflection, I realized, okay, this is not quite right. So that's weird. Not only, bringing the codes, bringing the symbols into the dream, but then doing the Virgo thing and being like, I'm going to edit that.
That's amazing. I love that. What so when you came back to consciousness or to, whatever this is,
Mhm.
waking life, what was your take on that?
Yeah, so I started trying to interpret it a little bit, but it was a little hard to interpret. And what I think is actually really interesting is that my dream maker substituted the moon for the star, almost like, you're sleeping, it's nighttime,
This is what
look
hit
at
me
that.
too when you're saying that. It's really astounding.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I sort of feel like, a lot of these dream signs, that was a particularly interesting one, but water is a constant dream sign for me as well. But as to the reading, the moon and then the Two of Cups and the Seven of Pentacles. The Two of Cups is an interesting one. That's the two people raising their glasses to each other. Um, it's interesting because it's first of all because I was with my daughter. It's astrologically connected to her, but also because there is that alchemically in that card. There's a sort of striving to achieve the great work. There's a sort of like unification of above and below, which of course, I think in the dream context could have to do with trying to understand this subconscious world with my conscious mind, hence the card. So there was that commentary. And then the Seven of Pentacles is also known as the Lord of Failure. so maybe I was
Yes.
really not succeeding. So that's what I was thinking about when I woke up. I was like, oh shit, I really missed an opportunity here.
I love that this is, I think you're bringing in a lot of new dream imagery that, or at least some of it's brand new
Mhm.
from Nox Mente episodes, and some of it is very uncommon, which I'm loving.
Mm.
Is how, so on the mechanics of the dreaming itself, how do you perceive the dreamscape?
This is really interesting. So, well, first of all, I actually have a place I go before dreaming each night as I go to sleep. I have a whole, I mean, I've never had trouble sleeping, but I like to make a little party out of it because I enjoy it so much. So before I go to sleep, I have sort of this place I go in my mind where it's sort of like, it reminds me a little bit of the Eight of Cups, actually, that sort of, moonlit landscape where you're descending towards a body of water.
I
And
love that card, by the
yeah,
way. I've
I
always loved
love that card too. It's great, isn't it?
everything's all set up. You can go. It's
Exactly. Exactly. Sometimes I have like a little place to sit on the banks if I feel like sitting there. Sometimes I put a little altar there, but there's always a boat
Mhm.
to get in at
Yes.
some point. So that's where I go. And I also have gotten in the habit these days of reciting the hymn to the Orphic hymn to sleep and the Orphic hymn to dream before I go to bed, sort of a prayer practice. So the Orphic hymns are this wonderful set of hymns that a lot of occult practitioners use for invocation because they're great. They basically, there's one for every planet, every god, for seasons, for everything you can imagine, and they're basically strings of epithets, very good for magic. And so I got really interested in them because I was a person who studied um, Greek in college, and I thought, well, this is one thing I can do with my classics degree. So I started memorizing Orphic hymns and in Greek, and I use the 7 planetary ones as part of ritual in the morning. But at night, before I go to sleep, I use the ones to sleep and dream, and they're actually a final triptych. Those in the Orphic hymns series, it's sleep, dream, and death. They're all considered siblings. So I use those two before I go to sleep. Now, and as I fall asleep, I'm always seeing faces, you know, things. And as a person who is a bit head blind most of the time, this is wonderful because, when you're journeying and you're like, I cannot make this go. I'm making this all up. It's not working. But at that moment before you go to sleep, you get all this stuff for free. And it's great. It's like, you see faces, you see, weird little spirits. I don't know. Do you get that too?
I do, for real.
Yeah.
It's
I've had lately where I'm getting lines, diagonal lines, but really close together, almost like a
Really?
grid pattern. It's really weird. It looks digital.
Is it
sounds
like
out
a
like
color?
algorithm.
But sorry, it's a white background, black lines. Like that.
Barcode, man.
Yes.
No, it's more like, think like a herringbone pattern, that kind of thin line. So, like, it's right when you're about to fall asleep, I'll get this flash of the white background, the lines, and then it's one of those things that snaps me back out of it. But yeah,
Oh, that's cool. That's
Are they
cool.
kind of like algorithms, Jer?
no, they're completely static. It's just like,
Like you were up against somebody's tweed jacket like this?
no, it's more like the background for a chroma key setup. It's
Mm,
something that the camera can focus on and like paint over.
got you.
So it's like, it's
Yeah.
almost as if my reality shipped away and I can see the backdrop.
That's suggestive, man.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
It's
Wow.
weird. Weird.
Weird.
That's why I think I'm an AI.
Oh, huh.
See,
Well,
we come it with the woo, Susie.
yes.
Woo.
I think we're all AIs, not just me. I mean,
Fair enough. So the actual landscape of my dreams is almost always overcast. It's gray sky, and every once in a while, I'll get, clear weather, and that's unusual and remarkable, but it's almost always gray sky, no matter where I am, and I do have, like, normal places that are dreamscapes for me. I'll dream about New York 2 or 3 times a week because I lived there for so long. I dream about, being in publishing again. I dream about my childhood home. So most of my dreams are set in places I sort of know. Um, sometimes they're set in places around here as well, but maybe 1/7 to 1/10 are in places I don't know. It's definitely not the majority. And I know you sometimes ask people if they dream in color or not, so I've been thinking about this for a while. Do I dream in color? So I don't consciously notice color, but I think I would notice if it were black and white. And I remember I had a dream 2 or 3 weeks ago where I was preparing food, which is something I do a lot in dreams as well as in real life. And I was taking out a dish of sweet potatoes from the oven. Notice they were orange. So there was definitely color there. It was like this orange, right?
Oh
So
yeah,
it
yeah.
was definitely there. Yeah.
That's interesting. I love that. I love that you come with awareness of Nox Mente. First of all, that is, it's really, it feels good.
Mm.
The fact that the color shows up, though, I do think a lot of times we don't think about it because we're just in the experience.
Exactly, exactly. All seems perfectly normal at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I'm always interested when I hear people talk about black and white because my dreams are predominantly color. And then when I go
Mhm.
lucid, things get hyper.
Yeah,
It's
I bet. I
hyper.
bet. Yeah.
And so it's just those things. And I think by even asking the question and pondering on yourself, and this is with anything in the dream, we
Mhm.
can set that up for
I
happening.
think you're absolutely right for the same reason that we ask ourselves, like, during the day, "Are you dreaming?" Try
Yes.
and set that
Yes.
up. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so in the architecture of the dreamscape, so when you're visiting places,
Mhm.
like the New York scapes,
Mhm.
do they shift from how they are in basically in reality, there where it feels, it's that same building, but it's different in the dreamscape, but it's that same building?
Yeah, yeah, quite a lot. So, I know Manhattan quite well, and I'm constantly having dreams where I start where I'm traveling up and down one side of the island or the other. So I'll start like way up in the east 90s or 80s and walk all the way down to the East Village. And there's also in my mind there is sort of like a mythic New York that's different that I will visit from time to time, and I've seen it a number of different times where I still have a sense of uptown and downtown, but it looks like nothing like New York, right? It's doesn't have it's like depopulated and dystopian and weird and with sea monsters and stuff. So that's
Oh,
different.
wow.
Sigmund the
Wow.
sea monster, maybe. Shallow.
Well, you
Yeah.
must know where I'm coming at now. So you mentioned sea monsters here.
Mhm.
And this is something I'm deeply interested in. And you mentioned water earlier, and I was working around to it. Let's get into water
Oh,
and
yeah.
sea monster stuff.
So, yeah, so there's, uh water is just like I think it's very rare for me to have a dream without water in it, either in the form of rain or puddles or pools or rivers or lakes or something, and I was just thinking this morning, "Why don't I realize it's a dream?" That's like a clear tip off, but yeah, so and I really do think that I don't know, it's a signal to me that, that I'm working backstage, but I wish I could be a little bit more aware of it. I had a really interesting experience with rain in a dream. Let's see, when was this? Probably it was last summer, I think. And so I had actually done a working with. So I had one of my friends in the occult community is the Renaissance astrologer magician Chris Warnock, and he had led a. mm, oh wait, no, this was a different one. Sorry. Okay, so that's a different lucidity dream. But okay, so here's a different one that happened in, I guess, April of last year. So I was in my classroom at Smith College, where I teach in the springtime. I'm in my bathroom, whatever, and there's like all this audio equipment in there. And I leave the classroom and I go walking through the courtyard. And what's weird about this situation was that I had actually done a magical working because there was some kind of awesome astrological moon electional going on. And I was like, well, what do you do when the moon is in good condition and you get to ask for stuff? Ask for interesting dreams. Ask for lucidity. So that's one of the things I asked for. So that night, I had this dream where I was walking through the courtyard at Smith College and under an overhang, and I noticed that it was raining. And as the rain hit me, I realized this is a dream. And it was almost like very gently, the rain sort of like woke me up inside the dream. And I thought, okay, the most important thing I need to do is stay lucid. And because I am the kind of person who can only stay lucid for like 1 second because I get so excited. So I'm trying to stay lucid, and and I'm looking at the ground, and I'm on roller skates, and I'm trying to look at my feet, and everything just sort of dissolves because I'm going. But what was great about that dream was that sense that it was a connection to what I had done early in the evening. The sense that if not causal, then definitely correlative, that this sort of work with the moon had something to do with the rain in my dream and the effect that it had on me within the dream. So that was really interesting. Um, Sea monsters, yes. It's pretty regular for me to be in the ocean in dreams and to find weird stuff there. Um, sometimes, sometimes ominous creatures that are actually quite friendly, and sometimes the reverse. Um, and I often have sort of James Bond sequences as well in the ocean. Those are always fun. I have a lot of river dreams because I grew up on a river. New York's bounded on two sides by rivers. So um, I often will. I have sort of a classic flying dream in New York, in the New York dystopia, where if I get lost, I just follow the river. That happens a lot. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I can come up with.
So some of the sea creatures, do they Mm. I'm looking for details as to how they appear,
Okay, so
especially the darker, scarier ones.
yeah, so I can only remember one that was really okay. So there's there's a situation in New York where the East River is full of monsters, but I never really see them. So I never actually get to see those. But then there's
And it's probably
another.
true.
Yes, yes, it's probably not fiction or dream at all. It's just a fact. And then but then there's another one I had in the ocean where in the actual ocean where I believe there was like some kind of, I would see like just a hint of it kind of a thing coming out of a shipwreck or something like that. And it's that thing in dreams where you don't know whether to look closer or run away, and you're sort of paralyzed. Um, and so there was, yeah, that there was definitely one of those where it was sort of like a multiple armed weird, I don't know what, never saw the entire body, but um
Cephalopod like?
I have had that as well. um I had one where I had one that was tarot related where I was hanging out with a tarot friend in a hotel, and he was showing me some new deck he got, and there was a card on it that had this very clear red cephalopod octopus on a blue background. Um, and I was really excited to see that one.
I think that's the Cthulhu Tarot.
It might be.
There is
Yeah.
such a thing. I haven't. Oh, I used to have it.
I bet.
I used
I
to have
bet.
it. I gave it to someone. But yeah.
That sounds really hard to divine with, though. Something is coming. Something else is coming.
I never actually used it. I really only use my thought deck.
Yeah, well, Thoth is great.
Yeah.
Thoth's great as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I'm looking also. I also. It's very normal for me to see normal creatures. Barracuda, shark, fish.
Yeah.
Scallops,
Dolphins.
Dolphins. Yeah, kind of all of the above. All of the above. But it's not like they're. It's sort of like in real. It's really quite like in real life where you don't have a real relationship with them. It's just a sense of awe and maybe fear being up close. Yeah.
Is there so also with since we're talking about kind of others in the dreamscape, what about other things? Other things that can fall into, and this is where, I think heritage plays a lot in this. So whether it's like the Fae, the Hallow, aliens, however you want to dress, what garb you want to put on the other.
Yeah, I think. See, I'm keeping my dream documents up here. Let's so I can. Oh, so this is the one I was trying to remember. Okay, so the monster in the sea was under an oil rig, and yeah, they were kind of sticky and scary and alien. That's how I just found that by keyword. So yeah, there are sometimes aliens, and there are definitely talking creatures.
There were stories of some kind of monster summoning ritual around the whole Deepwater Horizon incident.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Do you know in what tradition it was?
I actually heard it was someone trying to summon Cthulhu. But I've also heard Leviathan too. So I mean, it could be either.
Oh my God, you cannot make this up.
You keep triggering me on all this shit I remember. Like, oh, wait a minute.
I love these juicy details, Jerry.
I didn't even tell you about whatever else I wrote down here. I forgot where I wrote it, but whatever.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm also...
Jerry, can you get the information on that for like our notes and stuff?
If I can.
I would
It might have been in a
to
video.
hear about that. Yeah. So I've also had the experience of like being the alien as well. So, for example, I had this one where, or being the other, I guess you would say. I had one about body snatching. Is that a common one? Do you get body snatching?
Please give me it's a theme with a private group of people I talk to where I'm pulling information from.
No kidding. Interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's like you only need to see one of those body snatching episodes in pop culture, whether it's like Star Trek or, or one of the 60s sci-fi movies to like have that stick with you for life.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
The 70s one really affected me with Donald Sutherland.
Yes. That was terrifying. That was absolutely terrifying.
Truly terrifying. And it still holds up.
Yeah. So I had one of those where where these body snatchers come and they have, they're taking people over, and the problem is that once they do it, they can't quite figure out how to work the bodies, only how to push the people out of them. So they're kind of like walking around in this kind of klutzy way. Anyway, but the good thing about this situation in this dream is that once you're pushed out, you can take other forms while somebody else has your body. So I'm hiding because the body snatchers can see me, although others can't. And I'm hiding as like hiding as a rabbit under a bush, and I'm talking to a cat. So the cat looks at me and says, "Hmm, not quite human, not quite animal either."
The cat knew.
Oh, yeah, it was great.
Is
Yeah,
that is that all that happened around that?
pretty much, yeah, I think, yeah, well, I wrote down that I befriended it and it started to help. So I actually have a lot of those nice resolution type. Somebody helps me out in my shitty situation.
Do you recall how you got pushed out of your body?
Um, I don't remember the mechanics, just that I knew it was going to happen and that it did, like that.
Was there so the whatever it was that took your body, pushed you out, did you get any visuals of that before it was incarnate in your body?
Not that I recalled at the time I was writing the dream, so I don't think so, and now when I'm thinking back on it, all I remember was seeing people walking around clearly not themselves.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
You would be surprised at how much of that comes
Yeah.
comes around. And so even on that, like in a very on the very surface level of waking life in the horror genre,
Mhm.
we have that symbol of that through like say the zombie, the various forms of zombieism, and
Mhm.
where the personality's gone, the persona's gone, and it's just base functioning, whether it's eating brains or not, whether it's fast or slow. But it's basically like the mindless, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Have you had any of those kinds of zombie-ish things pop up?
Mm, not so much, I don't think, not not to recall. I think that, I think, um I mean, like anybody, if I watch something, then it immediately gets adopted for content, right? So if I watched The Walking Dead or something, then sure, that would be there, but it's not like a core theme for me personally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, oh yeah, it does. Of course, and we have to always take all that stuff into consideration, what we're being front loaded with.
Exactly. I mean, it's literally I will take that shit, whatever it was I just watched, and it will just keep watching it, you know?
Yeah, yeah, we're chewing on it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Also, so what I wanna hear about the experiences of lucidity, and I agree, they do seem for me, they're brief. They can be
Mhm.
many within one dream, but when they happen,
Yeah.
when I realize it's happening, I always pop out.
Mhm, exactly. It's just too exciting, it's just like and I was able to incubate it for, there was a period on my, probably 10 years ago, less, 5 to 7 years ago, where I was, reading Stephen LaBerge and, trying to do everything, and I went on vacation so I could sleep in, and I had some successful lucidity there, but in general, it's not something I'm terribly good at. I have one here. Okay, so I have about 4 records lucid dreaming where I had one where I was, looking at a piano, 'cause that was my instrument. I was, looking at it with my cousin, and I look at the label in the middle, and if it's my piano, it should say Baldwin because I had a Baldwin piano, and it doesn't. And the font keeps changing. So, it looks like boffin, bug, and baboon, So I was like, okay, that's what words do when you're dreaming. And I said to my
Yes.
cousin, I'm dreaming, I'm lucid dreaming, I'm afraid I'll wake up. So I try to stabilize it by looking down at her shoe, get my bearings. And it was weird because she was wearing these, like, battered brown leather, like, my cousin doesn't. She's a very stylish girl. So, anyway, once I finally got stable, maybe the hiking boots helped, I say, "It's a lucid dream. I can do whatever I want. What do you wanna do?" And my cousin says, "How about we do that flying thing?" So, "Sure," I say, and we go over to the front steps because obviously you need a little height. So I jump off and I manage to fly a little bit, but, inevitably, I'm wearing an incredibly huge black backpack, and I just can't get off the ground. I mean, I think I got, like, tiny, like a few feet, and then back to the ground. And I wrote down, next time I'm going to try and get rid of that backpack.
Yeah, get rid of the baggage, girl.
Exactly. So much baggage. And then the time that I started telling you about before was, oh yeah. So the one with my friend Chris Warnock who did dream working. So I had specifically done that working to try to gain lucidity, and it was a working to the angel Hanael, who is the angel. And you could ask for either a prophetic dream or a lucid dream, and I went for so and I hadn't had a lucid dream in a really long time. So that night I was trying to, in my dream, I was trying to copy a syllabus on a copier, and the copier was not working because dream machines don't work. And um and it was so dumb because I went lucid right at that moment. And, you're lucid, you could do anything. And I said to myself, well, since this is a dream, there is no reason I shouldn't have my copies if I want them. So, I went lucid in my dream, and all I got out of it was like collated and stapled copies.
Oh, that is it, but that is so common. They usually are
Yeah.
so mundane like that.
Yeah. 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 And then the last one I had was really, really seriously occulty. It was a really good one. It had to do with the Hebrew letter Hey, which is part of the divine name Yod Hey Vav Hey. And it's super. I also have like this is kind of in line with the millions of dreams I have that are about words and codes and very hermetic, and this stuff happens all the time. So anyway, I'm thinking about the letter Hey and how it sort of looks like I don't know, like a staple with a gap in it. And I was thinking about, the way those two legs are very stable, but the gap allows you to take a breath. And so I look down at my feet and I'm thinking about that. And um and I realize while I'm standing there that there's a difference between inhale breath and the exhale breath. The inhale one is the circumstances, the things that are given to you. And the exhale breath is the action, the things that you do. And I just stayed there for a while and thought about that. And that actually became part of my practice after a while, in real life. So, lucid dreams can really give you gifts.
I've totally heard that the exhale breath is the creative force. It's where the energy
Yeah.
is. It's a guy named Mike Emery in the UK talks about it and how controlling your breathing, and he does healing circles where they make a vortex of energy and send it someone's way. It's really interesting.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I think that those people who do breath work are seriously into something. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about breatharianism. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't think that's what you're talking about either. So just making that point.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
No, but breath work is is a serious occult practice. And if you can tap into that, there is amazing feats that can be unlocked through it.
Absolutely, absolutely true. I believe that to be the case. I've also gotten dreams, man. They've given me some really important parts of my practice. I mean, like I woke up one morning, and I've talked about this on other podcasts, but I woke up one morning and that's sort of like you're lying there clawing back whatever you can remember from your dream for as long as you can. But I remember sort of like washing up on the shores of consciousness, and I had this phrase in my mind. This happens a lot, but this one I knew it was important for me to remember. And the phrase was, within results are differences. Differences are offerings, and offerings are results. So I was able to figure that out pretty quickly, in terms of the frame that I look at the world, because it's a divination statement. Basically, the way I understood that, the within results are differences means that when you look at a card, there are multiple ways you can interpret it. Differences are offerings means that when you interpret it and choose a meaning, you're offering that back up to, to the world behind worlds, to the magical blueprint, whatever it is. And then offerings are results means that forms your new reality. So that phrase has become a really fundamental part of my practice, and and really integral to the way I understand how divination and magic work. So, you know, I would not have gotten that on my own. It just came to me.
This is again, this is such an occult when you get yourself into this mind frame of what's possible with
Mhm.
that state of consciousness that where we inhabit the dream realm, the dreamscape.
Yeah.
There's so much that's possible, just tangibly possible to unlock in waking life alone.
Absolutely. I mean, and I really feel like, every night there's you never know. It's like no matter how controlling you are during the day, you never know what you're gonna learn at night, and that's part of what's so wonderful about it.
Exactly. It never gets old. There's always like a freshness. There's always another level you can work on or work towards. And especially when we think about what are the powers within the dream, which are everything that, we become our own blockages, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I really think that, you know, dreams hold the key to really, in a way, to understanding how to solve life in a way, in the sense that, like, we are meaning machines living in a field of meaning, and that dreams sort of expose the mechanics underneath that, and, allow you to see how this is happening all the time, and the way that, your relationship with meaning changes your reality. So I really think that, a lot of the fundamental questions about that people ask about divination and magic, did it really happen? Did I cause it? Is it a coincidence? Blah, blah, blah. It all has to do with that relationship with meaning and the perspective you bring with your subjectivity to the reality around you. And that whether you're causing the change or announcing it, as my friend likes to say, or whether, you're the source of the reality or the reality is happening to you, they're really moot questions. They're really, quite meaningless when you come right down to it, um, because you are trying to parse that distinction with the wrong mechanism, with the brain that cannot understand that. So, so I think that there's a real um, there's a real fundamental uh, key in dreams to understanding the nature of what we think is reality in waking life.
I totally agree. One of my favorite YouTubers for years and years, like 8 years, she's gone into many things like The Real Witches of Orange County. Now she's like Mother Moon Pagan Monastery. Jacqueline DuBois, always talking about this, how we're meaning making machines, and how the stories we create around these meanings, and how they're traps
Mhm. Mhm.
in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm wondering, okay, so in this, I totally had of course, it's so me. I'm like I'm sniffing the trail. I'm on the trail, and there's like a shiny apple, and I got off the trail.
Squirrel.
Um, in in the states of lucidity, yeah, I mean, totally. Have you encountered others? This is kind of a two-part thing.
Mhm.
You encounter others that feel like they're not part of your own narrative and your own makeup?
By others, you mean like persons or
Right,
sentient
that are
beings?
this seem
Entities.
sentient or autonomous, not you.
No. No. So far, it's all been me. There's been mm, but I mean, I think that I don't think that that means they aren't there. I think that it's has to do more with my stage of development. I'm just not seeing that yet. But I definitely have had the sense of presence, particularly in dreams that are set in the natural landscape. So, I might have
Mm,
the sense of an animate stone, right, or
mhm.
tree without necessarily having what you would call communication. So, planetary presences, but then
Yes.
it's rarely lucid when that happens. So
Yeah.
no, but I don't rule out the fact that it could, and I certainly hope it will.
Yes. And so also on this, which is also kind of mechanics too, anything that has fallen under precognition.
I have had some psychic dreams. So I'm precognition, meaning, as in about to happen, no, but simultaneous, yes. So, for example, probably, oh gosh, here's a here's a funny one. So I don't, Ryan Peverly, right, from A Culture?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, lovely
absolutely.
guy, great guy. So we're sort of friends, internet friends, and I dreamed that he sent me a parcel. And and in this parcel, there were like a bunch of cards that were not tarot cards. I mean, that was the most interesting thing about them to me, that they were not tarot cards. But and they had words on them, and one of them said drunken. Anyway, and there was another thing in the parcel, which was the package that I needed to deliver to the Buddhists in New York, because I was in New York at the time and I needed to take them uptown to Tibetan problem. Anyway, so I told Ryan about this dream, and he's like, "Oh my god." First of all, when you had that dream, I was hungover. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, 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 yeah. And he was planning a trip to New York, and he was doing the prep work to interview a Buddhist on his show. So, so it was sort of like it was all there, but the usefulness, who knows? But
Well, the usefulness doesn't actually matter. Susie,
right.
that is incredible. And that's what I'm saying. It seems like in our meaning making minds too, especially that it has to be like astounding, like a world event. These mundane things, the more we push into them and acknowledge the greatness of synchronicity,
Mhm. Mhm.
I think is just phenomenal and can lead to maybe the bigger, broader
It's
picture.
just, a peek behind the curtain, the way I see it. It's just something that shows you the way things really work.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then probably the most remarkable one I ever had was a couple years ago, where I was at the time I was very close friends over text with another tarot reader in Australia. Talked about this on a couple podcasts too, where and because he was in Australia, our times were opposite and 12 hours apart. So when I was asleep, he was awake and vice versa. And I dreamed in the middle of the night that he was, typing to me on Facebook Messenger, because that's how we talk, that he had typed, "I lost my keys." And so I was, typing back, "Have you looked here? Have you looked there?" Just trying to be helpful. And then the next day I woke up and it was just like one tiny little snippet of dream, and like amidst hundreds of other dreams that night. And, very sociable person in dreams as opposed to real life. So I talked to a lot of people, but I remembered this thing, and I chatted with him and I said, "Hey, I had this dream last night and I dreamed you lost your keys." And he was like, "I did lose my keys." I was like, "No, you didn't. Get out of here. You're so funny." He had lost his keys. He never loses his keys. He had lost his keys. So, exactly, pretty much at the time when I had the dream. So, so that was sort of like that was a very mild sort of breaking of reality, but it was a breaking of reality for me.
Yes.
You know?
Indeed, it's quite significant, and the
Yeah.
more we allow the idea, the meaning of it being significant to seep in, the deeper you can go with.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I for me, that's what kinda happened, and so I really relish in the mundane stuff that pops
Yeah.
up. So,
Yeah.
and then on this, what about déjà vu?
Deja vu. So, yeah, I have, I think, 2 or 3 sort of regular, deja vu occurrences, but not so much in recent years. So, and definitely not in, well, I'm wondering if you're asking me in terms of the dream context, because of course there's recurrence in dreams all the time, but you mean in waking life?
Well, I'm leaving that open.
Oh,
So how
okay.
it could tie into the dreamscape, what do you
Yeah.
think in general?
Okay, so there's a couple of waking life deja vus that I have, which are not really bringing to mind, but I know the feeling produced in me and is very similar to the feeling in recurring dreams. So, for example, there is there's a recurring dream I have that has it's moving into a new apartment. That's the species, but the subspecies is walking into the vestibule and turning to the left and getting the mail out of it, which is of course something I did a million times. But in the context of the dream, I also will frequently remember, oh, this is something I do in dream. I've done this exact thing before millions and millions of times. And also, what's weird about it is that there's an apartment that I go to in dreams that is not one of my apartments that I lived in. And it's a place that I visited now in dreams probably 4, 5, or 6 times. It's a really nice apartment complex on the East River, with sort of courtyards, and I've got a really nice place there, so I hope I find it someday because it's really nice. Um, so there's that. That's really common. Then there's the flying through dystopia Manhattan. That's a that's a déjà vu dream for me. Um, oh yeah, and constantly being back at my office in Oxford University Press for when I worked for them. I don't know why I'm always going back there, but it's constant, and it's super annoying because it was not my favorite time of life, but it's just something that, I think it has to do with performance issues. So, yeah, that's something that I recognize usually, not usually, but sometimes to be, um, a déjà vu situation within the dream.
You could have some energetic tie to that place too.
Oh god, I hope not.
You never know. You never know what people do,
Yeah,
when you're there, what other people do can tie your energy to a place.
yeah. True. Yeah.
What do you think is so and I'm looking for the deepest so let's not the surface level mechanics of it all.
Mhm.
That that's all fine and good. I want your kind of deepest inner standing of what's really going on with the bridge between how we experience waking life and the dreamscape and what the broader picture is. How do you see this whole thing? What is this whole experience of consciousness about? I know it's a gigantic question, but if you
Yeah.
could, like there, I think it
Yeah.
points so we have glimpses of it. And so,
Yeah, so you're not talking about mechanics, but you are talking about model. So, I do think that, as a person who works with symbol and a person who works with magic, I do think that when we go back there, you know, in dreams, we're we're trying to reshape reality. And I think that maybe we actually do. I think that there's, you know, obviously, as you said, there's a lot of different mechanics that people use to try and get backstage. But I think that we're doing it constantly all the time, on purpose or not on purpose, awake or not awake. We're constantly messing around with that stuff. And I think that the dreaming life just allows us to um, get some understanding of what that might be like, what that what that work is like, or what that what that agency in the world is. So to me, if you can get better understanding and comfort with what's going on with you each night, then that naturally translates to better understanding and comfort with waking reality as well. And I also think that that helps us grapple with bigger questions of life and death as well, of what's beyond and what's before, what we know to be our conscious life. So, it's all tantalizing glimpses, but I don't think you ever waste your time by trying to understand better.
Oh, I agree. I think that, in fact, I think that these ponders are important.
Absolutely. So, you know, in terms of what's going on, I think that model wise, that um, when I say that we live in a field of meaning, that extends to pretty much everything. So, you know, that the part of us that is starved for meaning in real life has only to look and to find, the intention and the will, you could even say, to find the meaning for it to be there. And I believe that that means that there's meaning in everything animate and inanimate. And by meaning, we don't just mean something that's passively uncovered by our meaning maker. We mean meaning that everything has a meaning maker and that it's contributory and participatory and ubiquitous. So,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And
That's
everything is an
great.
expression of it.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Yes.
totally.
That's usually what I mean when I say reality is democratic, is that we're
Yes.
all participating in
And
this.
subjective at the same time.
But the
Mhm.
gravity that where, you're there, Jerry, in Georgia, and Susie's in
Western
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and people
Like
can land on the moon now because everyone believes they can. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a gravity to a weight to our thought forms.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, I think that there's this, I don't know, I'm getting a little bit over my skis here, but I just feel like, you know, we, you can't live as though you know you can't necessarily live as though everything's possible all of the time because you might go crazy. So I think that that there are rules and that there's something to be said on the materialist side for the rules of this physical universe, but it's good to understand that the rules are just a consensus and that at some level the rules can be changed. So, probably not according to the rules cannot be changed or broken according to the rule. They have to be changed or broken from outside. So, I don't know, I sound like I'm stoned, but I think you know what I mean.
I'm with you.
No, you're absolutely right. They have to be, the generation of the reality happens at a higher level, at an energetic level, and this is the result of it, the outcome.
Right. Right.
I'm totally on
And
board.
so
And that
how
energetic state is tied to the dream state, possibly the astral realm. And that is, I've heard a lot of people talk about this, that is the co-creationary realm for work in this 3D reality. In this field, if we're in a reality field, or if it's a planet, or whatever the hell it is, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That all the reality is manipulated from this energetic dream state with other people in unison. So it doesn't have to always be collective.
Right. And if you just look at the weirdness of real life,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly,
Just look in our chat room.
only it's
I'm
amping.
it's
in
not
the weird.
following the rules.
No.
Well, no, I mean, for the most part, I see our reality breaking down, or the status quo breaking down, the system it's crashing.
It's hard not to feel like that.
Yeah, I like it. I'm all for it. You know, got my popcorn.
Well, yeah.
I've got the mutable stuff in my chart, so I enjoy the mutability of seeing it play out in tangible ways.
Yeah, I'm just a
not so
mayhem horror. I
destructive.
just love mayhem, any kind.
Cue the commercials.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do get very frustrated with the attitude you sometimes see that there's, it's all going to shit, so you don't need to do anything about it. I do get frustrated with that because one of the side effects of having the beliefs about reality that I do is that you have a great deal of agency,
Yes.
an enormous amount of agency. And, you have, if not a responsibility to use it, maybe a God-given right to, or you know what I mean? So it's sort of like it's that thing like when I was talking about the inhale and the exhale, you have circumstances and you have agency. And, what we do in divination and magic is mess around with the formula of fate and free will so that you can deal with those circumstances and that agency and find a way to reshape them. So to me, that is something that, you know, I'm drawn to doing and I will always probably do. But also, as a person who works in the divination space, I can see the deleterious effects of fatalism on people's lives. So no matter what the
Oh, my
circumstance.
cat. It's not a show without the cat on the piano.
That the cats, they have a relationship with free will that yeah. So I mean,
It
I
just knocked the thought out of my head too.
Sorry, Jer. Oh man.
Well, you know that nobody can teach that cat anything about using your God-given agency to operate in this
We
world.
needed that example right there.
That's just Saturn fucking around. I was going to ask about, you mentioned free will and predestination, and really, that wasn't what I was going to bring up. I'll think about it some more.
Well, it's something that I think about. Like, it's like the number one question for me all the time, the question of agency or free will. Gordon prefers to call it agency, but I say free will because everybody has an idea of free will. And
and
versus,
that's why I use it as well.
yeah, or determinism or whatever you want to call it. And I really think that, to be comfortable with those two things at once is to be comfortable with life because, you're constantly dealing with uncertainty and you're constantly dealing with a varying level of ability to change that. So I don't know. I think that I think also that, there's the wild card of what um of your perspective that plays into that as well. So I don't know. I just think that especially if you work in one of these arts, you have to have a working theory for why you're doing it and what you hope to accomplish, uh, and how that will affect your relationship with agency and determinism.
It's interesting because every time I think about it deeply, I just come to a point where there's no way to tell. So it just comes, it's like a faith thing for me.
Yeah, and it's constantly evolving for me as well. I mean, right now I sort of feel like, the shape of the thing coming down the pike is there's definitely something, right?
Yeah.
So like if most astrologers I talk to are extremely fatalistic because, you can see it in the clockwork of the chart. But at the same time, you have some choice over how that's going to manifest. Same thing with the tarot card. Within results are differences. You look at it, there's a million ways it could come. The tower could hit you as like, you bang your head or you crack an egg or you have a car accident.
Mm.
So, the amount of flex within that think is something that you want to be able to work
I just remembered what I was going to ask. That wasn't
with.
it. Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, the flexibility within, you've got a path, but the road is wide. Right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or you have a, or you have a general shape, but you get to fill in the details.
Right.
You said you have a path, but the road is wide.
Astrology. This was my other question. There's some, it's been my thought too, that perhaps that is a programming mechanism or cage or mind prison, whatever you want to call it, to make you think, to make you act that way because you think you should. Because that's what, if you get a big natal chart done and this is you, well, this is you. And there's a school of thought, and I think I've had these thoughts too. What if that is just an extension of the system trying to get you to fit in well into the available slots here?
Well, I think that comes down to the appetite for fatalism generally, because it's not just astrology or tarot or whatever. There's innumerable divinations, right? You could read things in bones, you can read things in tea leaves, you can read the coffee grounds, puddles, entrails,
Cat box.
Exactly.
Meaning making machine.
Exactly. And I think, the traps are there no matter what, and the freedom is there no matter what. It really is a question of which you choose to embrace.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting.
Yeah, no, but it's a really interesting thought. It really is an interesting thought. And I think that, in a sense, we prevent ourselves from going too far down that hole, for those of us who work in divination, by saying, okay, this is the oracular, this is the space in which everything is meaningful, but then we put it away and we go and live our lives, hopefully taking a little bit of what we learned in the oracular session with us. But, if you take that attitude with you all the time, it is a trap. It's more pins, more strings, and you can really get yourself tied up in knots.
And sure, and you should absolutely not do something just because, my horoscope says I'm, this way and I should do it this way and not do it this way, which I want to do it. That's stupid. But I can see people doing that.
I absolutely do, because it's the desire for certainty and the idea that I mean, it's terrifying.
It's FOMO too.
Notion that you could have control over your destiny at some level. It's
absolutely. That's so key.
Yeah,
I think it's also like there's the FOMO, the fear of missing out on being on the winning side.
There's that too.
Yeah.
But and I think that when people come to me for reading, they're looking to shift the story. So, and that they've come with one story and it's not working. And it's time for us to rewrite the story or make a different ending or say it's this kind of story, not that kind. And they can't do that on their own. It's very hard to do that for yourself. So therefore, for the moment where you are open to that change in story, you come to someone who you view as an authority. And it's very easy to just, kind of get lost in assigning the authority to somebody else. It's really a tool for that moment.
Yeah. Who cuts the barber's hair, right?
Right.
I love that, Jer. And so oh man, I want to continue on with this, but
we're at 2 hours, by the way.
I know. So I'm going to move into my last bit, and
I'll gather questions.
So where does death play in all of this? So we can access different states of consciousness here, right? We can access memory, we can access dream, we can access active imagination, all this. We can, ponder into it, breathe into states of consciousness. Death somehow, and of course, before birth, they have this otherness to them, this apparent separation. and which gives them more of an edge, right? There's
Yeah.
a grit there, and especially anyone who's dealt with the death of anything they love, anyone they love, pets to relatives, and you understand, like, there's
Mhm.
a void there. It's hard to even there are no words to
Mm.
describe the void in your physical life. What's going on with all that from where you stand, Susie?
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting because I was just thinking that I rather than experiencing it as a void, I would say, and having been sort of newly exposed to grief, I can speak to the experience. It feels like vertigo. It's like standing over the abyss, and it feels like your stomach's dropping out from under you, like you're face to face with the unknown. And to me, maybe, you know, maybe it's not a void, it's just the absence of understanding, right? Because we're naturally afraid of what we don't understand or what we don't know about. So, when I think of my father and stomach drops out from under me and I feel like all of a sudden I don't know where I am, maybe that's me, being face to face with that other reality, right? With the world beyond worlds, with the maybe that's something the feeling of trying to do something in waking life that maybe you can only do in another state, in dream or in sleep or in trance or whatever, but that you cannot do it when you're trying to operate, as a human being alive and awake in this world, which is really just this tiny moment, different, special, and weird. So, so to me, just as you can process the same experience as negative or positive, I think that you can process that vertiginous moment of, you know, facing the unknown in either a positive or negative way. Or maybe you can just let it be and not try to force it to be one or the other.
I like the that let it be and let the experience happen. For me, when I think of the void, it's like I'm dealing with a death right, like a real close to. So I'm having a hard time even talking about it. I can't even
Mhm.
and I'm trying to process it,
Mhm.
and which is why I haven't been very social media oriented lately. It's like for me, the void is so we create these, we have our patterns, right? We have our daily
Mhm.
patterns with people, the closer in, and that's the void. So it's this hole that's created that nature will grow over. Nature grows over everything, right?
Yeah,
And so it's more like, well, where am I in this process? Where are they? Where am I? Of course, you've heard me say this probably, that I don't believe in death in this
mhm, mhm,
in the esoteric way,
mhm.
and but I'm constantly trying to understand the strangeness of it and the
Yeah,
intangibility of it, the way you can you can't quite reach it, you can't quite touch it until you're there.
until you're there, yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like, that moment in what's my favorite scene in Harry Potter where Sirius falls through the veil, and he's there
Yes.
1 second and then he's gone, and
Yes.
but he's so close.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I was
That
just thinking.
that was like the
Yeah.
saddest ever thing I read in a Harry Potter book. When I read that, it's funny.
It's
It
devastating,
was.
absolutely devastating. But I was thinking about that and, the experience of, like, looking out into the void like that, it's like, here you are on terra firma, like, at the edge of the cliff and standing out over this abyss with the wind just blowing in your face and, completely at a loss. And one of the things that people kept telling me over the last week or two, and which I'm so grateful for, is that they were holding space for me. And,
Mm.
and I thought, what does that really mean? And to me, it was almost like they were, if you think about that metaphor, it's as if someone is saying, okay, you are facing the void, but I know where you are. I know where your space is, and I'm going to hold you there no matter what happens, right? That's what I like to think of when I think of that metaphor. And I think it's true because, you know, it's like you are facing something that is so dislocating, so disorienting, so capable of, so powerful, it can draw you out of what you believe to be normal, that somebody has to hold your place for you while you're doing that.
Mm, I like that. There's something very comforting in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's almost like, what is, if you think about just like the words holding space, what does that even mean? Right. Because, it's like space is nothing,
I always
but
imagine it as that the person's going to imagine you were there with them. You're holding that space open.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. It's sort of like, a recognition that you're a person and that you're there. Right.
Hmm.
Even if you don't feel like you are. Like, it's like you're standing online at the checkout, you got to go to the bathroom. They're holding your place for you.
I bring it right down to the mundane. This
And
is where
wash
we
your hands on the way back.
Oh man,
Yeah.
this has been fantastic. Do you have questions, Jared, from
I have
people?
one question from Talam. He would like to know, if you had to put one deck in your bag and walk off into the wasteland alone, which one are you taking with you?
Oh God. So, you know, there are so many good answers to that question, but if somebody like, you know, put me literally asked me that question with a gun to my head, because that's the only way I could answer it, it would probably be this little guy. This is a version of the Rider Waite that my friend
Is
Naya
that the
gave.
Morgan Greer?
No, it is the classic Rider Waite Smith, but it is a vintage edition, so it looks like
Oh,
tea
nice.
stained and old and
Cool.
kind of battered, but it's actually fantastically laminated. So,
Okay.
I use this all the time, and you know, uh, I have to say that I always come back to it, regardless. I mean, right now I'm using a really wonderful show you called the Spirit Within deck. And this is cool. It's all silhouettes. And hey, here's a dream card. That's totally appropriate for what we're doing.
That you pulled. Yes, that's
Seven of
great.
Cups and Page of Wands.
The
So I
hexagon of
really like
Saturn.
this. Yes. Yeah. And this one's been great because it's brand new to me. I started using it when my dad went into hospice. And this is my deck for that journey. So
Yes.
I'm going to
Yes.
keep using it until I feel that he's, whether it's 30 days, 49 days in the Bardo, I don't know, but I'm going to keep using
Yes.
it till we're done with that work. So
Six of
that's a really
Swords. I use decks in that way too. Your Rider Waite, look, my Rider Waite deck is probably 40 years old. So when you've showed that, it looks like mine. It wasn't aged.
yeah, I know. I really love it, even though I know it's fake aged, but it's so well laminated that I could like spill molasses on it and just throw it under the sink and it would be fine.
Oh, that's
So,
hilarious.
but I just really like it. So
I
what
love
can I
them
tell
as
you?
they age, and I actually have given away many decks that I used for a very long time or for specific reasons because
Mm,
I believe there's some power in that transmission from one person to another
I
with
think that's
magical
true.
tools.
Well, I think that like anything that you use a lot, first of all, has a certain amount of magic attached to it, but something that you're using in this context of meaning where you're conversing with it and arguing with it, having dialogue every single day, that's powerful.
Yes, indeed, and the things that have come to me that way also I value the most. It's like with my mom. I didn't get anything from her. People are so weird when someone dies. I just walked away,
Mm.
but I did get one thing, and it was this crystal she wore around her neck for almost most of her life, and I thought. this, and it came to me in a very strange way. It came to me roundabout. Someone snuck it to me.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
And so,
What kind of crystal is it?
it's just it's a little amethyst ball in a silver setting that is just gorgeous.
Mhm.
And but crystals hold the energy, right? And I thought,
Yeah.
how appropriate that this is what comes to me of her estate. This is where
Yeah.
her energy is. Really, truly. She wore this every single day for her short life, you know?
Wow. That's what this is for me. It's just it's a
Was it
quartered cross,
jade?
and it's a quartered cross in silver.
Oh, I see it.
Yep,
Yes,
yep.
yes.
I made it with a friend.
That's
few
also a
years-
Lucifer symbol, the cross.
It's a symbol of everything.
I know. It's
Yeah,
great.
it's very alchemical. It's
Yeah.
right there in
Yeah,
alchemy.
Not that I have
yeah,
a problem with Lucifer. I'm just saying.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's and it's something that the symbol is meaningful to me, and I am not a person who has totem jewelry at all, but this was the one thing that
Yes.
that's where I'll be attached, if anybody's wondering when I'm
That
gone.
yes, and that's the thing. I agree. Oh man, that's a whole different I wanted to, Susie, for later conversations, I wanted to get into some of the crystal stuff here.
Mhm.
And it's obviously it's not going to happen now, but I'd like to further that at some point because I'm just emerging into those again, and
Mhm.
I'm having life-changing experiences with things like kyanite.
Oh yeah, kyanite, it'll zip you right up.
Amazing
Yeah.
dream stuff, amazing blue
Really?
kyanite, black kyanite, yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm itching to talk to people about this stuff.
Yeah, no, I was never a crystal person until I started, reading for people and working in a crystal shop, and oh my God.
Amazing.
It's
I can't
amazing.
yes,
Yeah.
I had, it was almost too new agey. I always had
Mhm.
crystal jewelry, trust me, I'd rather have crystal than glass and all that. So I've always had crystals around me, I love them and for the beauty, but not working with them.
Right, right.
And so now it's blowing my mind.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
blowing my mind.
You mean in working with? Do you mean are you drawing spirits into them and working it with them that way, or just in their raw energetic form?
I'm programming them.
Yeah.
And I'm using them in grids
Drawing
and
spirits,
activating
programming, same thing.
yeah, like the blue kyanite with dreams. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just that the very first night of sleeping with blue kyanite, it was a flood of incredible dreams.
Do they have a
Unbelievable.
different quality to them?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like, you know, do you think that the kyanite mostly increased volume or depth, richness, clarity?
Oh, in the dreams.
Mhm.
Yeah, yes, clarity, also
Clarity for sure.
recall for sure. And I think, it's hard for me to say if it's the kind it's ringing the death if I'm working with moldavite and some pectites at the same time, trying
Mhm.
to bring in more galactic type. I'm really trying to just be open now to stuff I was not so open to in the past because that's
Moldavite
where I
is
am.
weird stuff.
I had a moldavite earring jump off my ear. People witnessed it, and I was so freaked out because they're so expensive, and I got a real one. There's fakes out there,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Where's that moldavite?" I don't want to spend that money again. They're priced, and it jumped out of. I'm out in public, and I'm just there, and it jumped off my ear. It just didn't want to be on
So
me or something.
weird.
I don't know. So
Yeah.
I haven't put that particular one back on me. Moldavites are crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. And I only just learned about Moldavite.
Yeah, a lot of personality in there.
It's unbelievable. So I'm singing the praises and wanting to get in those conversations.
Need a new podcast.
I know, Jerry.
We have it planned. I've got it all planned out. We just got to find time to do it.
We need another one with crystals, Jerry.
Well, crystals could be one of the month things, whatever.
Actually, you're right. It could be one of the series, one of the little threads.
Yep.
I'm just carrying on now. This has been super enjoyable, Susie.
Yes, thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
You are tried. for sure.
Definitely, if you want to plug something, I've got all your links in the description. But if you have new stuff you want to talk about or what's coming.
Probably the most important thing is the new course. So along with the book this year, Tarot Correspondences, Ancient Secrets for Everyday Readers, I set up at the exact same time a course for people to take online called The Living Tarot. And it's not as nerdy and esoteric as my normal work. It is intended to help anybody start to read. So that can be found through my website, www.tsusanchang.com, and all sorts of other goodies are there.
Great. Thank you so much. And all those links are in the description, I said, and they're in the show notes too, and they will be in the podcast. So thanks everyone for listening and tuning in and being in the chat and being part of the show. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Nish.
Thank you.
And be sure to tune in next week. We're kicking off our meditation and magic month with Geraldine Orozco from San Francisco Meditation Guru Lady. She's cool. Lots of astral stuff, lots of dream work. So
I'm loving this month.
Yeah. So everyone, take it easy. Have a great time. Have a great night.